We have with us Chitra Narayanan, editorial consultant at the Hindu Business Line. In her 2.5-decade-long journalistic career, she has had stints with Business World, Business Today, Economic Times, and Business Standard. She has also written for The Mint and Telegraph. She has written widely on marketing strategy, workplaces, travel, and hospitality. She has also authored a book titled From Oberoi to Oyo, which talks about innovations, disruptions, and challenges that define the Indian hotel industry. Today, as she joins us for Quorum, she will delve deeper into the new ways of engaging with media. And joining her on stage after her keynote address will be Sandeep Rao, co-founder and CEO at OneSource. Welcome, Chitra.
And lovely being here today. And I think most of you are familiar faces or familiar names. It's a topic that I think it's constantly debated, right? I mean, and I feel that I'm in a particularly good place to talk about it because I think in the introduction they said 2.5 decades of journalism, but I think it's closer to 3 decades. So I really feel my vintage here. And when I started, there was hardly, any PR. In the sense, PR was there, public relations and media relations, but it was invisible. So almost the first couple of years that I was doing stories, I don't think I even met a public relations person or a CopCom person. We had to, find our stories in the most ridiculously, insane way. You know, we would read newspaper clippings and newspapers, follow leads, and just go randomly, keep meeting people. And I don't know how, we just generated leads on our own. This was long before email was, long before email had made its advent, long before. It was like the old-fashioned way. We would bus it to places, we would attend events, and that's how we got our stories. So, and then I had my baby, and I kind of took a break from work. And when I came back, I actually moved to a very leisurely monthly section. When I came back to the mainstream paper, everything had changed. Suddenly, you couldn't meet anybody without a PR interface, without a media interface. It was like a shock. So the ways of finding a story had changed, ways of doing a story had changed, ways of, getting your inputs, everything had changed. We couldn't do without, although it rankled, we couldn't do without the PR community. So let me, when Amit suggested the topic, new ways of engaging with media, a lot of things came to my mind. Let me go through the obvious things. So, given my perch of having seen how the whole scene has evolved, I thought, let me look at what has changed since the time I joined journalism and the current reality. So what has changed? Everybody knows the types of media has changed. Earlier when I joined, there was just television, and television too, at that time, there was only Doordarshan and a few NDTV and a few channels, not this plethora of hundreds and hundreds of channels. So there was just print, television, and audio. And today you have print, television, and audio, and digital. And within digital, you have social, you have video, you have OTT, you have personal blogs, you have company websites, you have your own, like what they say, you have, can we move to types of media? Yeah, you you have your own company websites where you can create your own content. You don't have to rely on the media, so to say, earned media, owned media, paid media. So you have your own media as well. So moving on, the next thing that has changed is the types of content. We had the old-fashioned, article in the days that I joined. You had a simple structured story. You had, in television, you had the very basic structured story where you give the 5 W's and 1 H and you just gave the news and that was it. But today, you have, thanks to BuzzFeed, you have listicles, you have, the whole content scene, I must tell you that there are 2.5 quintillion bytes of data generated every single day. That's the amount of content put on the internet every single day. And just YouTube puts out 4 million hours of content. Now, that's YouTube. Facebook, it's user generated. Just calculate the number of members, and if everybody is posting at least once a day, think of the content put out. A publication like mine, Business Line, we have, say, about 75 people on our rolls. Everyone puts out 2 stories, that's 200 stories plus, and plus, of course, podcasts and whatnot. So just think of the content out there and the types of content, podcasts, plain stories, multimedia content, everything has changed. Moving on, the rules of engagement have changed. Earlier, when I just joined the profession again, as I said, the PR was invisible, the Copcom was invisible. So you kind of encountered somebody who came on media rounds, so to speak. They would meet senior editors, they would meet us in the evening, there were structured hours for meeting us, and everyone respected that, and there were boundaries. Today, it is like bombardment from all sides. I don't think there are any rules for engagement. Everybody, it's not that, I think the junior most intern can call up the editor of an organization, which is in a way good and bad. It's good that there is no hierarchy and that you're reaching out to the topmost without fear. But on the other hand, think of your own, client, say, would you get a junior reporter from a publication to meet the CEO of a firm that you represent? No, you wouldn't. But the rules of engagement seem very different when it comes to PR and media, because everybody reaches out to everybody. There is no sense of privacy, no sense of, there's no sense of formality. Everything has changed. Moving on. There's information overload. There's access to information also has changed. So, okay, in the old days, okay, in between there was a period where there was this, a wall, the PR wall. So we couldn't access a company for information. We had to go through the PR gateway. But today, everything is out there on the internet. You just have to search for it. So, access. I see that journalists now, again, are bypassing PR. They just post on Twitter saying that I'm doing XYZ story, can you give me leads? And people just give them leads. So they are bypassing you. Or they are reaching out direct to company officials through various channels. And, and if all we have to do again now is if we show a little bit more, from the journalist side, if you just do a little bit of digging, you look through, a lot of websites, the company websites, you just need to patiently trawl through them, trawl through the annual reports, trawl through SEBI, trawl through RBI documents, and all, you will find information. It's just a question of corroborating. Moving on. The pressures and targets have changed. So for the journalists, the deadline, here it says deadline today, but it's actually deadline now. In the next 10, some news breaks, in the next 5 minutes, we have to have it up on the web. It's as pressing as that. For the PR professional, it's the pressure of the target. You have to get that story that the client wants out there, and you have X number of stories you have to put out there. So for all of us, the pressures and targets have changed. Moving on. Yeah. So this was what I had stated was the obvious. Everyone knows the ways of engagement have completely changed. But quite simply, I feel there is only one way. And it's a tried and tested way of engaging with media. Any guesses out here? I would like you to answer this. Any one of you, can you guess which is the best way to engage with media? Sorry? Can you louder, please?
Sharing their stories and commenting on it. One-on-one saying that you found this story great. This is what you derive from it. I think that builds a very strong rapport between a PR person and.
Okay, building rapport. That's a good way, but it's not the complete answer. Any other guesses? Sorry? With facts? Yeah, you have to present facts, but that's also not the. I would say that's not the way to engage. I mean, that's also one of the ways, but it falls into. Yeah, carry on. Yeah. Yeah, doing homework. Yeah, doing homework is good, but that's also not the answer that I'm looking for. There are multiple answers to it, but the answer I'm looking for has not yet come. Yeah, tell me. Yeah, that's also, chatty, I mean, informal conversation, candid conversation, right? But again, that's not the answer I'm looking for. I'll give you all a clue. Your own community has done a study on this. I'm going to make this really easy for you. One of your community has done a huge study on it and regularly keep doing studies on it. So it's all, the answer is with you only, because it's your, sorry? Absolutely right. You've got the answer. A large round of applause, please. May I have your, yeah. Yeah. So build trust. You have to build trust. I mean, every forum that we go to, we hear today that the only commodity that kind of, I cover marketing. So everyone talks about, that between the marketer and the customer, how do you move forward? The only commodity is trust, and let's move on. And this is the Edelman Trust Barometer is the study that I am referring to. I think it's an exemplary piece of research. Year after year, Edelman does this, and I look at it with great interest because I find there's so much to take away, though this particular thing in the 2023 barometer is not at all to our credit. It says journalists are the least trusted cohort. So, but then what about PR? It doesn't actually, the study doesn't look internally. It talks about business trust and governments, and it talks about how little people trust the government. But, can we go back still? Yeah. But can you, trust is, you have to build, think of it. How many of you trust a media person wholly and totally? You might trust few of them, but you have this inbuilt kind of thing that will the person write the story right, or will the person make mistakes, and will the person get us into trouble? And from our media side, we absolutely don't trust you. Let me put it this way, we'll say that, oh, this person is plugging away and this is not correct and this person is manipulating us, and all. There's complete lack of trust today between the PR and the media community. How do we break through that? Let's move on. I think the gentleman before me, Rajat, his presentation was so good. I listened to it, and I think the points he made on communication were really, really good. He talked about transparency for a company. And I think honesty and transparency actually leads to really good stories. A journalist is not, all the time looking for a breaking news, what do you call it, a Bofors kind of story. We are just looking, our everyday bread and butter is just a good story. So if the company is not transparent, you take us on media visits to XYZ company, but it is like, put like this thing, and we are just led. Nobody lets us loose and let us talk to people. Nobody's 100% transparent. Let me give you my own example. Recently, I was pleasantly surprised when Jaipur Rugs invited me to Jaipur to see their facility and to talk to their weavers and all. They let me completely. They said, here, you're here in Jaipur, here's the car, you go. And literally, they sent me on my own to talk to the weavers. There were no minders. And I think I did one of the best stories. I mean, it was actually pretty much in favor of the company, but it was completely organic because they trusted me, and there was genuinely a good story. And I got so many people, a well-known CEO even messaged me saying, great story. So think of it. I mean, it was a very simple story. Why? Because the company was honest, transparent. They trusted me. They let me kind of go on my own. The other point is investing in long-term relationships. With some of you, okay, there's this common rant I keep seeing that media doesn't pick up phone calls. They just never answer. So many of you call me and says your colleague never answers. Even I don't. These days, I simply don't have the bandwidth. I don't answer. But why? Because I don't have a long-term relationship with you. I don't know who you are. You're calling me up. Whereas there are some people whom I know for, say, 20 years, who I'm in constant touch with. Somebody from your community, I will pick up the call irrespective. If I miss the call, I'll call back. So don't just call a person for a story and then forget about the person. But build a relationship. In fact, call the person when you don't have a story, or when at leisure, try and engage. Many of you, I find favorably, have engaged with me on social media, got to know me as a person, got to know my tastes. And those are the people who I pick up the phone, I actually take all their calls. Why? Because they have invested in building a relationship with me. Moving on, communicating effectively without ambiguity. Now, ambiguity is a very dangerous thing. And a lot of communication that we get from you guys are vague, ambiguous. And don't forget that the media is only a messenger. Your end goal, what is your end goal? You want to get the story across to the customer, right? Not to the reader. The media is just the messenger, and you are, conveying. But if you have conveyed the message incorrectly to media, and then the media will convey it incorrectly as well. It's like the Chinese whispers. So please don't be vague, don't be ambiguous, don't just, write flowery sentences which mean nothing, but be very factual and unambiguous. Next is honoring a commitment. If you have, so many of you say, yeah, I'll get you an appointment, this, you guys pitch. And then when we turn back and say, okay, we're ready to talk, suddenly, the company spokesperson is not available, this. What do we feel? The trust is broken. I'm not going to trust you again. Doing your homework well, one of you spoke about this. I think that was bang on. Very often, so often one finds that the journalist knows more about the company than the person pitching a story. Or they don't even know that you've already covered the story, it's already appeared, and you have to inform them that, hello, I did the story a month ago, don't you know? So just avoid, do your homework well. Respect boundaries. I talked about how, interns are calling up the editor. My former editor, he would say, in the middle of a meeting, he would pick up the call and find it's from, a very junior PR person. And he would be annoyed because some of us are very friendly, gregarious. We pick up everything, we chat with everything. That kind of misleads the community, and I think that you guys have a huge database going around showing XYZ journalist is very accessible and all that, this thing. But even you might be accessible, but do respect boundaries. Don't call every organization, at least every print organization is busy after 5 o'clock in the evening. So don't call at 5. At 5 o'clock, don't start calling. Between 5 to, I think, literally 9 p.m., you are bogged down in stories and editing and all kinds of things. So don't call them. Understanding generational differences. I think this is a very important one. Because I think, so here I did say about boundaries and all, but that's because I am from a vintage generation. But say a millennial in my office, she might engage with you. She may not mind if you say, hey, hello, and all that, So do understand when you are communicating with a media person, understand which generation the person belongs to, and accordingly tailor your communication to that person. I think also, there are lots of, everybody is kind of set in their way. So I think actually I need to go back because there's something in, can we go back to what has changed? Let's go back to what has changed. Yeah, actually 2-3 things I forgot to mention here. What has changed? Mindsets have also changed. Mindsets of journalists have changed. Now, I feel sad saying this about my own community, but earlier when I joined the profession, we were all completely neutral. We would go with open minds to do stories, No longer are minds open. You have people who are woke, who are activists, who are what do you call it? Polarization is a word, who have set opinions, who have decided that only a negative story will be a good story and will not do a single positive story. We know which are these publications. We know there are journalists who are just looking for greenwashing and will chase corporates who they feel are greenwashing and things like that. So the mindset has, and this is the most dangerous change that has happened. So you have to also understand the mindset and negotiate that mindset barrier. What has changed also, this technology which has changed. Technology, and this I would say in a very favorable way, at least I find it favorable. I'm not talking about ChatGPT and AI and using AI, but I think again, one among your community, I think one of the PR firms among your community has, I think, WYSIWYG or something. They use technology. They send a mail which says, "Are you interested in a follow-up?" And all the journalist has to do is press yes, click yes or no. So there is no harassment. If I press yes, only then I get a follow-up call or a mail. Whereas most of you'll send a mail, then follow it up with a WhatsApp message. You'll see the blue ticks and I'm of the generation which still keeps the blue ticks. So you should know that I have read the message, and yet, if I have not responded, that means it has not interested me. And yet, the call will follow. Okay, so here again, the generational differences, A millennial doesn't keep the blue tick on, so you don't know whether the message has gone or not, so your call might still be justified. But where you receive the information that the email or the message has gone, even then a call makes no sense. So there, the use of technology is very smart to actually gauge interest. If the journalist is interested, they'll get back. Let's move back now. Sorry to do a kind of, okay, so build trust, understanding. Okay, so now the things to avoid, spray and pray. This is again like a digital marketing term. Everyone, if I just, it's been like 4 hours since I checked my inbox, but if you see it now, there will be 300 unread mails. And probably 4 mails saying the same thing. It is, and on every conceivable subject. Of course, I can't blame you all because I don't have a structured beat. I cover anything and everything. So, you may be forgiven for bombarding me with information, but it is still, it's not going to get you anywhere if you just pray and pray. You have to do most of you public relations is a component of marketing, and most of you have learned from marketing about targeting, using data and insights to do good targeting. So why don't you understanding the journalist's beats, understanding the journalist's interests, and also understanding the journalist's seniority. Now, if people are calling me up to tell me about and many of you do that, calling me about a company appointing, and a very unknown company appointing a CMO, do you think a journalist of my seniority will even look at it or put it anywhere? I will most likely bin it. At the most, I'll hand it to the relevant person. So the relevant person would be some intern on the news desk. So why don't you just reach the intern on the news desk who would make use of it, understand who's covering features, understand who's covering news, understand what are the news avenues within that publication. So don't spray and pray, but do good targeting. Then ghosting after chasing. Again, so many people call up. So finally, to reward the persistence, you say yes, and then no word. Absolutely no word. Because, okay, I understand the client is not responding, but you can still drop a word saying it's not happening, I'm sorry, just apologize and say it didn't happen. We thought it would happen, but it didn't happen. Just be honest about it. So don't ghost us. Over familiarity, that's swinging the other way. Wrong targeting, I've already talked about. Manipulation, this is a bit of when I talked about trust, because some of you will simultaneously talk to two people in the same publication. So then there is this feeling that, oh, we are being manipulated. Or you'll talk to one publication which we all know, the public relations community's most favorite publication. You will give it to them. You will give them the news a day before you give the rest of the papers. And of course, there's even the journalists feel manipulated. So some of them have even set up WhatsApp groups and decided to band together and boycott that company because the company is only talking. Yeah, we do that. So there, if you manipulate us, it leads to backlash like this. There are I've attended. There's just so much anger about it that that you feel one publication is the only publication that you have to give the story to. Then why are we wasting our time? Because at the end of the day, we are also answerable to our editor who will, in the evening call, say that you missed that story. And how do we say that? That's because the company thought that only that publication merited. So don't manipulate. Yeah. So as this I mentioned before, what a journalist is actually looking for is just a good story. The gentleman before me, Rajat, had made a very interesting point about how at Bosch and Lomb they did this whole fashion show and everything. What a quirky thing. For me, that's a good story. But it's so difficult to get anything quirky offbeat. As I mentioned earlier, we have 4 million hours of content being generated, so much of content being generated. All of us want to do something which is different. It is so difficult to get what is different from the pitches that are sent to us. So, okay, sometimes when we engage with the company, we do come upon the quirky stuff. So one way I would suggest is just make an engagement happen. A lot of you are doing this RBM, which is again a new thing, relationship building meeting, etc. But many journalists are averse to accepting an RBM without any obligation for a story, because you meet the person thinking it's a relationship building meeting, but you come back and you say, is there a story? So why would I meet somebody if I know? So we've also got a little, we've got a little wary of doing these RBMs. But actually the RBM, when you meet somebody, is a very, very good way of getting information, quirky information, or something offbeat which has not appeared anywhere. It's also the journalist's, chance to get something. The other way is, immersions. I think a lot of companies have begun to do these. Am I running out of time? Yeah, okay. So yeah, I'm just wrapping up. I think the last few slides. So a lot of companies have started doing these media dinners, get to know each other kind of thing. But it's often on a Friday, 7 p.m. at, I mean, when we are in the midst of deadline. So I don't think you're doing any, I mean, you're spending a lot on a 5-star dinner where most of the journalists just can't turn up, you know. So do it. I think it's a brilliant idea to get to know the leadership of companies. Do these things more often, but do it at a time more suitable for journalists. Okay, then this also I had mentioned earlier, don't lose sight of the fact that the media is the messenger. So don't let the story get lost in translation. Be very, very clear and unambiguous. Finally, here's to fruitful collaborations with trust and capital letters at the center of it all. So I hope you'll all do many things to build trust. Thank you so much.
So, the worst time to do a talk is either pre-lunch or pre-drinks, right? Everybody is either half off to sleep. It's like when I turned 30, and I started, or rather, I used to drink a lot. But when I used to drink, I'd make sure that I never sat down and didn't stay close to my phone, right? Because I can see pretty much 30% of the audience either on their phone or dozing off, which is completely fine. We're all waiting for lunch, right? So I'll just bore you for, say, 15 more minutes. So let me start with the first of my 3 questions, Chitra. And yes, like the previous panelist said, we do rehearse these, honestly, right? So first up, a little bit of an exercise. How many people here have worked in PR in some form or format? How many people? Show of hands, really quickly. I know a lot of you, I can call out names. Thank you. Right? How many people have seen the quality of newspapers dip? The paper on which it's printed. How many of us have seen the quality drip? Right? Literally, if you try dripping something through it, you just have to wait for 30 seconds. How many people have seen the number of paywalled stories go up really quickly? Thank you, thank you. So, Chitra, there's one aspect, there's a Chitra who consults with a business line. And there's a Ranveer Alabadia from a Beer Biceps, right? So there's one aspect, we discussed quite a few things. There's one aspect of understanding what to pitch to who and building relations rather than just looking at it one story at a time. But so let's try and answer each question in 3 points if that's possible, please, Chitra. 3 ways in which people could be educated about the changing media landscape. And I'll tell you why I ask. The print question I asked because ads in print are going down, automatically leading to quality of paper, right? How many people here have had clients tell them, will the story appear in print? Right? I can vouch for that as well. So how does one go about educating the entire ecosystem, the client, the journalist, the PR professional, the corporate communicator on the brand side, as the case may be? How do we go about educating this entire ecosystem of the changes that are today coming about in 3 points, if I could?
Actually, there's just one way, I think. I don't even want 3 points. I think you could do immersions. You will find that the media, I mean, we also struggle, you know. I mean, okay, talking about the quality dipping, yes, because pressures of time, pressures of, you know, quickness, etc. The one way that we can change this and also help in building trust in some ways is do a immersion with the media. Why don't you call up a publication, say, call up my publication, I'm like putting my neck out there, my editor might say no, but you could like start with the Delhi bureau, why don't you engage with us and understand what our day in our life is like? Come over, maybe a Saturday or something when news flow, when our pressures are less. Come over in the morning for a cup of coffee and put this proposal to the editor, come over and understand what we are looking for, how our day is, news flow is, understand this. Maybe 4 or 5 of you from each organization can come and then educate your own organization and understand our paywall pressures too, because if we don't have infinite space in print, so everything goes on digital. In fact, the first thing we tell people when they pitch is that we can't write it in print. There's just 18 pages, we don't have space, and it'll go on digital. And at once we face this, even a pointer in print and all that. You will understand, there's no, advertising is declining. So we have to also generate revenues. You'll understand our pressures if you come and visit us, but not like a media round where you're just meeting one journalist for a story. Don't do that. Come to understand how we work. I used to run a column called A Day in the Life of a Workplace. And it helped me understand I think I went to Publicis, I went to HUL, I went to whatever. I met the HR and I understood the entire workflow, how it is, and it helped me understand the company better. So why don't some of you take the trouble and come and completely see from everything from where the news story starts to how it is printed, how the news flow is. I think there might be resistance, but some people might be open also, even if you manage to get into one media house and see for yourself experience. Many of you actually have been journalists before you moved, so you do understand it. And I think those people do make better communicators in that sense when it comes to media, because you've understood the pressures. But for those who haven't, an immersion could help.
Thank you for that, Chitra. So, point number 1 for everyone, try and understand the day-to-day life, the fact that edit meetings have moved to earlier.
Let me tell you that. So, can you believe our day? In the morning, we are expected, the minute we wake up, to monitor all the news. So from 6 a.m. to 8, we could get a call at 7:30 from the editor saying you missed X number of X. Actually, you get WhatsApp saying, Mint had the story, that one had the story, And then nowadays, we have at 10 a.m. a meeting for the web stories. In fact, the previous night, before we close for the day, we have to list a whole set of events for the next day, so that the web desk is alert. So we may finish our work for the paper, but our work doesn't end, because then we have to send a list to the web desk saying X event is happening, if the SEO meeting is happening in Goa, this, all of us have to pull in and send a list. So the web desk is alert and looking for it. Then so in the morning, we have to read the papers to see what we've missed, what we've captured, what's gone right. And then when you barely have time for breakfast, and then there's a meeting with the web desk to do web stories. So in the morning, we have to file something for the web. Moving on, you barely have lunch and whatever, you have then time to go chase your story. And evening, 5 o'clock, it's time again for the edit meeting, and your stories are being completely
thrashed.
Yeah, thrashed. Either they are accepted, not accepted. If they are accepted, then you have to quickly write it around and turn it around. And then now, remember, we have to do 2 versions. This is again a new pressure we have. One version for the web, which can be longer, filled with everything, and one small version for the print. So I have to do the story same way. And the web version, increasingly, since our paper went in for redesign, and we called the celebrated Mario, who told us that every story has to be optimized for mobile reading. And when you mean optimized for mobile reading, it means it should contain definitely 2 or 3 visual elements. Now we'll get the story, but we've not got the visual element. So we have to create a chart, we have to get the photos, we would have got the story, but then we start chasing the PR community for a picture, or we start trying to get the graphics team to create a graphic. It's impossible. So think of it, and you finally close at 10 o'clock.
So one of the new ways to engage with the media is redefining the old one, going back to the basics of understanding the life.
Understand our lives.
Right. Second question, and I'm going to share an anecdote here. Gentleman's Magazine in India has a technology editor. Technology editor decides to call me up one day and says, Sandeep, I cover consumer technology, right? And there's a PR person who just called me. And we were standing outside, and I told you right now, I've been a television anchor maybe a decade and a half ago, and I still get calls saying press release cover kar dijiye. And I'm like, I was a television anchor. Who covers press releases on television, right? But fair enough. We all live with pressures. So the gentleman in question says, Sandeep, somebody just called me, I cover consumer technology. And the person said, there's this new technology on the market in the lingerie space. And I beg pardon for those whose sensibilities I offend. But the person actually tried to pitch to me bras that unhook in the front and said it's new technology. Right? And he was a little furious and he said, how is it that I go about explaining to your community? Right? Now, personally, I don't understand the concept of your community, my community, because they're two sides of the same coin. Yeah. When a company gets funding, sure, it's the journalist who's anyway going to pick it up. The rest of the time, it is the public relations professional who has to get the job done, and it's literally how that works. So how does one go about educating the communicator better about how to resolve the homework challenge?
Actually, in this particular example, I am on the side of the PR community because it's an audacious pitch, and it should. I mean, if it was a woman on the other side, a woman correspondent, she might have actually, her interest might have perked up. So, good try. That's what I would say. I mean, we are looking for sense. I mean, that technology editor could have, it could have given a different spin, and written it. So I'm always looking for something quirky, so I would welcome quirky pitches. But yeah, you're right about mistargeting. This particular story might have been better in Vogue or Femina or somewhere, or Times or somewhere. But this is common. Again, it comes back to the one thing that understand the journalist, understand each and every journalist that you target. All of us have LinkedIn profiles, all of us have social media profiles, most of us. There are a few private individuals, but you can always go and look up the person, look up their interests, look up what they are fond of, and understand them, and then, understanding leads to better pitching.
Thank you. So in terms of new ways to engage with the media, the first thing that you said was, whether it be a Ranveer or whether it be a Chitra, we take the time and effort to find that one friend who we can ask to come across and either educate us at our offices or go across and spend a day. We will try that. The second is, you mentioned in terms of the communicators ecosystem, that homework is necessary, right? Now on to the third question, and this one rankles. I think it rankles all of us. Quick question here. How many of us have worked with a firm? And please note, I'm an erstwhile journalist, so I do understand the irritation of getting a call to cover a press release at 11 at night. It's ridiculous. My co-founder and wife is sitting right here. She wonders why I take those calls, right? But a question here. How many people have worked in a firm that has faced naming and shaming by journalists? Please don't name the firms. Just anybody here who's courageous enough? Anyone? A journalist naming and shaming a colleague of yours on social media? Thank you. I really appreciate I appreciate and salute the candor and the courage there, right? Uh, Now, most PR professionals can't afford to do that.
Yeah.
In our case, the question is, यार journalist ने story करना बंद कर दिया तो, right? And there's all sorts on both sides. I personally know enough journalists who accept brown paper envelopes, shall we call them, for example, right?
I don't deny. I mean,
Right?
there is.
So there's all sorts.
Yeah, all sorts of journalists. So, yeah, I get where you're going, where your question is going. I completely, I mean, I think naming and shaming is not a good practice and should be, I mean, it's very sad. And I mean, occasionally even I may have got so irritated that, but at least I have tried and blanked out the name and I've only put the offending pitch out there. But here again, it's the reverse thing. So I mentioned that many of you don't understand how the journalists' world works. So similarly, many of us don't understand how the PR world works and what your pressures, what your compulsions are, see, when I joined the profession, I was lucky enough to join under an editor who was a great mentor, Mr. T.N. Nainan. I think he actually, you won't believe it, I was 24, 23, and he took me to visit. He would occasionally take young reporters to visit when he was going to do stories. So thrice I've gone with him, once to Maruti, once to NIT, and the relationship that got built with these companies is thanks to him taking me. So it's mentoring. In newspapers, that mentoring has gone completely. Even I don't have the time to mentor people in my own team. Similarly, many of you, I think, don't invest in mentoring. If you all mentored your juniors, I mean, let's admit it, though we do, like if I send somebody from my team, a young person, to do a story, I do make sure to ask her what are the questions you're asking. So I do ask her so that she doesn't make a fool of herself, Similarly, how many of you are, when you are asking a young person to pitch to a journalist, how many of you are asking her, what are you writing, how many of you are checking that? The other thing is, yeah, good, I see a hand going up, very nice. So the other thing is, journalists are leading a high-pressured existence. They have their own, so I can understand that they are taking out their anger and whatnot if they missed a story, whatever. But from our side also, we need to develop the empathy. So maybe this interaction that I talked about, it could be, if you call journalists to your office and say, just give a talk or whatever, and let it be a two-way thing, we'll understand how you work. It can lead to a better story. The outcome, after all, from both sides, is a good story.
So, question here, Chitra. There's the privilege of the press card, and there's the duty of the press. Now, there's enough folk, and I'll take a few names here. There's you. I've bothered you for a decade and a half, on an average. There's a Sanjay at Bloomberg. There's Malti ma'am at Times of India. A Shunandada at Times of India. Barunda at PTI. These people find the patience, God knows how. Right? You people find the patience, God knows how. But how do we, what is that one way? For example, one way to educate the ecosystem is get a journalist to speak to a firm, or get a couple of people from a firm to live the life of a journalist. The latter easier said than done, but not impossible, right? Training the PR ecosystem better, never too late, I personally feel. But the third aspect, how do we educate the newer lot of journalists? Because it's not the, and I will use the word vintage, I will borrow the word vintage here. It is not the vintage lot that we face a problem with. It is somebody who's got maybe 2 years of experience, 3 years.
So I did talk about generational thing. So you do, I mean, we also face it, I mean, I would never have thought of answering back to an editor if the editor pulled me up. But today, if I pull up somebody saying, oh, this story, you missed this, I get chat back, you know. And I mean, they'll just say, oh, this, that, you're like, I mean, the old ways of looking at it and all that. So you do have to understand each generation and deal with each generation the way that generation understands. If the millennial is impatient and has whatever, you meet them. And the other thing, actually, one more point on the naming and shaming is, if that has happened, a naming and shaming has happened, I would say one remedy is whoever has been named and shamed, why doesn't the person then write a mail to the person who has named and shamed them and say that, you know, I'm sorry that I made a mistake that caused you to rant about it, but can I explain the circumstances and can you give me a hearing? Most of you just take it lying down. Come on, develop a spine. You know, you can, I mean, you said the PR community cannot answer back and they take it lying down, but you can always write a polite letter explaining your circumstances, and maybe the journalist will meet you halfway and say, yes, you know, I mean, let's put the incident behind and move on. You know, maybe they'll become, I mean, I'm being an idealist here, of course, it needn't happen, but there are ways. You could always, you know, communication has to be constant. You should not also take things lying down. You should write, you should ask, like whenever sometimes our journalists face an issue, our editor stands up for us. If a company accuses our journalist of making a mistake, the editor, we find, always stands up for us. We've had cases where we've got letters and the editor has said, I will answer it, and does it. So if a journalist from your organization, I mean, if a PR person from your organization has been named and shamed, why doesn't the head of the organization take it up and bat for the person? It's up to the leader.
Thank you for that, Chitra. So I'll end the conversation on a note. An editor from, incidentally, the Hindu had said, doctors put their mistakes in the grave, lawyers put theirs in jail, journalists put theirs on the front page. Right, and I'd like to take a moment.
Well, we put our breaking news also, yeah.
So it's a question of understanding both sides and persisting, not giving up. And yes, I do agree. The spine bit, reed ki haddi, is extremely necessary. So yeah, but on that note, I'd like to thank Amit here. I was actually researching the number of name and shame instances, and I came up with one where Amit actually responded to the person in question and said, if this were your child, would you not forgive them? So on that note, I'll turn it over to the audience. Any questions? I'll be able to take 1 to 2 at max. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Ritika. I work with the practice. So I have a very pointed question. First of all, Chitra, I mean, we really enjoy reading your stories. So my question is, what about the, popular opinion that exists about the industry, that we don't do our research enough and all of that? So what is your take on that? That, I personally feel that there is generational opinion that exists about the industry that we don't do our homework enough. While I feel that has been addressed too, and there is a lot of unforgiving, forgiving opinion that is there about the industry, that we just do blind calls and all of that, while I'm sure a lot of people in the room would disagree to that. So what is your take on,
one can't generalize, but I think the sheer numbers, I have a feeling if you look at a journalist ratio, in a news organization like us, our Delhi bureau, there are just some 10 people, and 10 of us have to cover. I mean, I'm not even in the news bureau. I'm a consultant. I have my own ecosystem, so I don't even help them. But 10 of them have to cover some, I don't know what, 40, 50 beats between them, and they are so constrained. But we feel somehow that in your case, you guys, there are 3 of you pitching for the same company, 3 or 4. Today, I've got a mail from one particular brand campaign. I've got from 5 people from the PR organization. 5 people. I can show it to you. So 5 people have sent. So there is this feeling that in terms of numbers, sheer numbers, your industry has just too many people. And I guess not all are, but obviously there will be a few good eggs and a few bad eggs. So, and when the bad eggs dominate, that tends to lead to this unforgiving opinion, you know. It all leads down to better training, better mentoring, better understanding, all that.
So,
Did it answer it?
allow me to cut it short here. There are enough people waiting for lunch. You can, of course, and please forgive me, you can, of course, catch a hold of Chitra during lunch. On that note, thank you, everyone, for your patience, for waiting for lunch, and for tittering like delinquents when I said lingerie. Have a very good evening.
And also I must really compliment the organizers of this event. I think I've very rarely seen events that flow to time, you know. Amazing time management. Amit, hats off to you and a very engaged audience. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being here. And I hope we'll all understand each other better and do better stories together.
Thank you.